Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was hunted by Batman for knowing the future. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The first thing Izuku Midoriya registered was the smell. It was a soft, cloying scent, a mix of aged paper, dust motes dancing in the afternoon sun, and the faint, homey aroma of his mother's katsudon drifting up from the kitchen. It was the smell of his childhood bedroom, a scent he hadn't experienced in what felt like a lifetime, which was impossible. His last memory wasn't of sunlight and katsudon. It was of ash and ozone. The taste of blood, coppery and thick in his throat. The agonizing fire of 100 broken bones screaming in unison. One for all, a supernova of emerald lightning, was tearing his body apart from the inside out, a desperate, final gambit against a monster wreathed in shadow and malice. He remembered the crumbling cityscape of Kamino Ward, the ground littered with the bodies of heroes and villains alike. He remembered the piercing, soul-shattering scream of Ochako as Shigaraki's hand, all 5 fingers outstretched, reached for her. Izuku's eyes snapped open. He wasn't lying in a crater of his own making. He was in his bed. His bed in his old room, the one he'd lived in before the UA dorms. He shot up, a gasp tearing from his lungs, his hands flying to his chest, expecting to find the mangled ruin of his hero costume and the shattered flesh beneath. He found only a thin, worn All Might t-shirt. His hands, they were small, unscarred. The gnarled, twisted road map of 100 battles, the permanent souvenirs from Detroit smashes and 1,000,000% attacks, were gone. These were the smooth, unblemished hands of a child. He stared at them, turning them over and over. They felt alien, like borrowed things. Panic, cold and sharp, sank its teeth into him. He scrambled out of bed, his limbs feeling strangely long and uncoordinated. His feet, bare on the cool wood floor, were too small. He stumbled, catching himself on his desk, his gaze falling upon the wall. It was a shrine. A testament to a brighter, simpler time. Posters of a smiling, vibrant All Might in his silver-aged costume adorned every available inch. "You can be a hero!" one declared in bold, primary colors. Izuku's throat constricted. He remembered that smile. He'd last seen it on a skeletal, broken man coughing up blood, a man who had given him everything and for whom he had failed to secure a peaceful future. His eyes darted around the room, cataloging the impossible. His collection of hero figurines, long since packed away, stood pristine on their shelves. His middle school backpack was slumped by the door, and on his desk, next to a half-finished drawing of Kamui Woods, was his notebook, not volume 28 or 29, filled with hard-won analyses on the Hien Noma or Gigantomachia, but a familiar, slightly burned volume. Hero Analysis for the Future, number 13. He snatched it, his fingers tracing the scorched edges from Bakugo's casual cruelty. He flipped through the pages, his own childish scrawl detailing the quirks of heroes who, in his memory, were either dead, retired, or broken. "No, no, no, no," he whispered, his voice cracking, unnaturally high. He needed proof. Irrefutable proof. His gaze landed on the small digital clock on his nightstand. The red numbers glowed with damning clarity. April 26th, XXXX, 10 years. He was nearly 10 years in the past. The year he met All Might. The year he inherited One for All. The year everything began. A wave of vertigo washed over him, so intense he had to grip the desk to keep from collapsing. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. He tried to breathe, but his lungs wouldn't obey. This wasn't real. It was a dream. A hallucination brought on by blood loss and trauma as he lay dying in the ruins of his world. He needed One for All. It was his anchor, the part of his soul that connected him to its 8 previous wielders. He closed his eyes, sinking into the familiar mental space, reaching for that familiar sun, that burning core of power within him. He pushed. He strained. Nothing. There was no crackle of green energy. No comforting whispers from the vestiges. No surge of strength coursing through his veins. There was only a hollow, cavernous emptiness. The place where a universe of power once resided was now just him. Quirkless. Useless. Deku. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. The trauma of the future war, the faces of the dead, the weight of his failures, it was all trapped inside this weak, powerless, 14-year-old body. A scream built in his chest, a raw, agonized sound of pure horror, but it caught in his throat, turning into a choked, ragged sob. The bedroom door creaked open. Izuku? Honey, is everything all right? You made a sound. He looked up, and his heart broke all over again. Inko Midoriya stood in the doorway, her face unlined by the years of worry that would later carve themselves permanently into her features. She looked younger, healthier, her smile gentle and questioning. This was his mother before the USJ incident, before the Kamino nightmare, before she had to watch her son come home time and again, held together by bandages and sheer stubbornness. He couldn't speak. The sight of her, whole and happy, was a blade twisting in his gut. Izuku? She asked, stepping into the room, her brow furrowing with concern. You're pale. Are you feeling sick? He had to say something. Anything. Just a nightmare, Mom, he croaked, the lie tasting like acid. Her expression softened. She came over and placed a cool hand on his forehead. The simple, maternal gesture was so overwhelming, so poignant, that tears began to stream down his face. Oh, my poor baby, she murmured, pulling him into a hug. He buried his face in her shoulder, his small frame shaking with silent, racking sobs. He wasn't just crying for his lost power or his impossible situation. He was crying for her, for the peaceful life she deserved, a life he had inadvertently stolen from her. He was crying for Sir Naitai, for Midnight, for Gran Torino. He was crying for Bakugo, whose final, desperate act of sacrifice still played behind his eyelids in a fiery loop. He was crying for a future that had burned to cinders. As his mother held him, whispering soothing words, a terrifying resolve began to crystallize in the core of his being. He was back. He didn't know how or why, but if he was here, if this second chance was real, he wouldn't let that future happen. He couldn't. The knowledge in his head was a weapon, a burden, a curse. But it was all he had left. He would use it. He would save them all. And as he clung to his mother, the echo of Uraraka's scream finally faded, replaced by the silent, crushing weight of his new mission. The next few days were a study in disorientation. Going to Aldera Junior High was like walking through a museum of his own life. The teachers whose lessons he'd forgotten, the classmates whose faces were blurry memories, they were all here, loud and vibrant. And then there was Bakugo. Seeing Kaken, loud, arrogant, and blissfully unaware of the path of redemption and sacrifice that lay before him, was the hardest part. The explosive boy who shoved him in the hallways was a ghost, a pale imitation of the hero who had apologized, who had fought alongside him, who had taken a fatal blow meant for him. Izuku found himself flinching away, not from fear, but from a profound, aching grief. He avoided him, keeping his head down, his muttering silenced, his presence as small and insignificant as he could make it. He spent every waking moment not at school in a feverish state of planning. His mind, honed by years of strategic combat and analysis, was his greatest asset. He filled a new notebook, not with hero worship, but with a grim ledger of fate. He listed dates, incidents, casualties, and villain debuts. The sludge villain attack. The USJ. The hero killer, Stain. Kamino. The Shaiha Saikai. The list went on and on, a litany of tragedies he now had the power to prevent. The sheer scale was paralyzing. Where did he even start? If he prevented the sludge villain incident, would he ever meet All Might? Would he ever receive One for All? He needed the power to fight what was coming, but the path to getting it was paved with danger for others. He decided to start smaller. A test. A controlled experiment to see if he could truly change things without causing the whole timeline to unravel. He remembered a minor news report from about a week after he got his powers. A C-list villain calling himself Sledgehammer Tetsu, whose quirk allowed him to turn his hands into dense, powerful mallets. He'd attempted a daylight robbery of the Musutafu's central bank. The robbery was clumsy, but in the ensuing chaos, a support pillar was destroyed. The collapsing awning had crushed a civilian car, killing a young couple and seriously injuring a child in the back seat. The heroes had stopped Sledgehammer, but they'd been too late to prevent the real tragedy. Izuku remembered the details with chilling clarity because he had obsessed over them, analyzing how the heroes could have responded faster, how the collateral damage could have been avoided. Now, that obsessive analysis was a weapon. He knew the day. He knew the approximate time. And most importantly, he remembered a detail from the villain's police file that had been released later. Sledgehammer's quirk was powerful but had a specific weakness. While his mallet fists could shatter concrete and steel, they were structurally ineffective against impacts on reinforced carbon fiber, the kind used in high-end hero armor and some advanced anti-crime security measures. The bank's vault was made of it. The plan was simple. Risky, but simple. He couldn't go to the police. A quirkless, paranoid middle schooler reporting a future crime? They'd laugh him out of the station, or worse, call his mother. He had to be anonymous. He had to be precise. The day of the planned robbery, he used his lunch money to go to a dingy internet cafe several blocks from his school. His hands trembled as he paid for 30 minutes of time on a public computer. He used a temporary, untraceable email service to draft a message. He couldn't send it to a major hero-like endeavor. It would be buried in an avalanche of fan mail and crank reports. He needed someone local, competent, and likely to check their agency's tip line personally. His memory supplied a name, the armored hero, Crustacean. A B-lister with a powerful carapace quirk who ran a small but respected agency near the bank district. He was known for being thorough. Izuku's fingers flew across the sticky keyboard, his message concise and packed with impossible detail. To the Crustacean Hero Agency public tip line, from anonymous, subject, urgent, imminent threat Muzutafu Central Bank. At 10:32 a.m. today, the Muzutafu Central Bank will be attacked by the villain Sledgehammer Tetsu. Quirk, hammer fists. He will enter through the main doors after creating a distraction by shattering the front window. Crucial weakness. His quirk is ineffective against reinforced carbon fiber. He is vulnerable to rebound shock if he strikes it. Planned escape route, East Side Maintenance Tunnel, exit located in the alleyway behind Kenji's Sushi. He will target the main support pillar on the left side of the lobby to create chaos. Preventing this is critical to avoid civilian casualties. Act immediately. This is not a prank. He read it over a dozen times, his heart pounding. It was too much detail. It was insane. But it had to be. He hit send, wiped the browser history, logged off, and walked out of the cafe, feeling like he just armed a bomb. The rest of the day was agony. He couldn't focus in class, his leg bouncing with nervous energy. When he got home, he turned on the news, his stomach churning. He waited. And waited. Then, on the afternoon news broadcast, a special report flashed across the screen. A flawlessly thwarted bank robbery attempt in Muzutafu's financial district today, the news anchor said, her voice bright. Sources say the armored hero, Crustacean, was on the scene before the villain even entered the building, acting on what he called a highly specific and credible anonymous tip. The would-be robber, identified as Tetsu Morita, was apprehended with 0 collateral damage and we are happy to report 0 injuries to civilians or staff. The screen showed footage of Sledgehammer Tetsu, looking bewildered and defeated, being loaded into a police transport. Behind him, Crustacean gave a thumbs up to the camera, his crab-like armor gleaming. The bank stood pristine, its pillars intact. The street was calm. No crushed car. No grieving families. Izuku stared at the screen, tears welling in his eyes. It worked. He did it. He had reached back through time and plucked 3 people from the jaws of fate. A small, fragile flicker of hope ignited in his chest. It was a terrifying, exhilarating feeling. He could do this. He really could. He had saved them. And thousands of miles away, he had just tripped the most sophisticated alarm system on the planet. The air in the Batcave was cold, ancient, and smelled of damp limestone and ozone. It was a cathedral of shadows, where the only light came from the colossal bank of monitors that formed the heart of the beast, the Bat computer. Water dripped from a distant stalactite, a rhythmic, steady beat in the otherwise silent cavern. Barbara Gordon, Oracle, wheeled herself closer to the main console, her brow furrowed. Her fingers danced across a holographic keyboard, data streams flying across the screen faster than a normal person could read. For the past hour, she had been chasing a ghost. One of her algorithms, a complex program designed to flag statistical impossibilities on global hero and law enforcement networks, had pinged. The alert originated from Mizudafu, Japan, an anonymous tip regarding a minor bank robbery. On the surface, it was nothing. But her program hadn't flagged the tip itself, it had flagged the probability. The tip had contained the villain's name, not a known entity, his quirk, a specific and obscure weakness of said quirk, the exact time of the attack down to the minute, the method of entry, a key tactical objective, the pillar, and the precise escape route. The probability of an anonymous civilian informant knowing all of those variables was, according to her analysis, 0.000001%. It wasn't an inside job. She'd already run checks on the bank's employees and the hero agency. It wasn't lucky. It wasn't a guess. It was predictive. She isolated the source. A public terminal in a Mizudafu internet cafe. The user had employed a Russian-based temp mail service, routing their IP through 3 different countries. It was clean. Professional. Too professional for a random tipster. A heavy tread on the metal platform behind her announced his arrival. She didn't need to turn around. Problems, Babs? A low, gravelly voice rumbled from the shadows. Maybe, she said, not taking her eyes off the screen. Or maybe something else entirely. Take a look at this. Batman stepped into the light, his armored form seeming to absorb the very illumination around him. He was already in full gear, having just returned from patrol. The white lenses of his cowl narrowed as he looked at the data she had compiled. He read in silence, his mind processing the information with the same relentless efficiency as the supercomputer at his back. Source? He asked. Anonymous. Untraceable by conventional means. Sent from a public terminal. The user was there for less than 5 minutes, Barbara reported. Analysis? The tip wasn't just accurate, Bruce. It was perfect, she said, turning to face him. It reads like a mission briefing written after the fact. The level of detail is impossible for any standard informant. There are only 2 possibilities. 1. The informant is part of the villain's crew and had a change of heart. I find that unlikely, given the precision. They didn't just want to stop him, they wanted to dictate the exact terms of his failure. Batman remained silent, his posture unmoving, a statue of black and gray. And the second possibility? Barbara took a breath. The informant has a precognitive quirk. The silence that followed was heavy, profound. In their world of gods and monsters, precognition was the holy grail, and the ultimate Pandora's box. Batman finally moved, placing a gauntlet hand on the console. He brought up satellite imagery of Mizudafu, Japan. A precog with a heroic inclination. He mused, his voice dangerously soft. Someone who uses their knowledge to prevent tragedies. That's the optimistic take, Barbara countered, her expression grim. The pessimistic one is that we have an unknown entity with the ability to manipulate the timeline for reasons we can't begin to fathom. They saved 3 people today. What about tomorrow? What if they decide to prevent a peace treaty from being signed? Or tell a dictator how to win a war? What if a villain like Luthor or Ra's al Ghul gets their hands on them? Batman's jaw tightened. He saw it instantly. Not the hero. Not the savior. He saw the threat. A person who knows the future is the single greatest security risk on the planet. They are a weapon of mass disruption, capable of destabilizing global economies, blackmailing world leaders, and directing the flow of history like a river. They are a time bomb, ticking in the heart of a city halfway across the world. This unknown individual was not to be praised. They were to be contained. The tip was sent from a public terminal, he stated, his mind already formulating a plan. But the user had to get there. They live or work or go to school nearby. The radius is manageable. What are you thinking, Bruce? Barbara asked, though she already knew the answer. We can't risk a direct approach. If they can see the future, they'll see us coming, he said, his fingers typing a series of commands. A schematic appeared on the screen, a tiny, matte black drone, no bigger than a thumbnail, shaped like a bat. We start with passive surveillance. I want to know who holds the future in their hands. He looked at the satellite map, his gaze zeroing in on a high school located within a 10-minute walking distance of the internet cafe. Aldera Junior High. Find them, Babs, he ordered, his voice leaving no room for argument. Find the ghost who speaks of tomorrow. A week later, Izuku was walking home, lost in thought. He'd done it. He'd made a difference. The knowledge felt good, but it was a fragile, nervous kind of good. It was the feeling of having cheated on a test and gotten away with it, but knowing the teacher is still watching you. The world around him felt different now, sharper. He was no longer just a passive observer. Every news report, every siren in the distance, sent a jolt of anxiety through him. Was this an event he knew? Was someone about to get hurt? Could he stop it? The burden was constant, a low hum of pressure at the base of his skull. He clutched the strap of his yellow backpack, his gaze distant. He had to prepare for the sludge villain. It was the next major event. It was his gateway. He had to be there. He had to show his courage. He had to be worthy in All Might's eyes, all over again. As he rounded a familiar corner, a sudden chill prickled the back of his neck. It was a feeling he hadn't felt in a decade, but one his battle-honed subconscious recognized instantly. It was the ghost of a sensation, the faintest echo of his danger sense quirk. It was the feeling of being watched. Of being hunted. His head snapped up. He scanned the rooftops, his eyes darting from window to window, from fire escape to water tower. He saw nothing. Just the setting sun painting the clouds orange and purple. A flock of birds took flight from a telephone wire. The street was normal, filled with a few other students and salarymen making their way home. He shook his head, trying to dismiss the feeling. You're being paranoid, Izuku. You don't have danger sense anymore. It's just stress. But the feeling lingered, a cold spot between his shoulder blades. He quickened his pace, his heart starting to beat a little faster. He felt exposed, vulnerable. His quirkless body offered no defense, his mind the only weapon he had. A mind that held the most dangerous secrets in the world. He didn't look back up. If he had, he might have noticed that one of the birds that had taken flight from the telephone pole wasn't a bird at all. And if he had looked even closer at the pole itself, at the junction box where the wires converged, he might have seen it. It was small, no bigger than his thumb. Matte black, absorbing the twilight. It clung to the metal casing like an insect, its design subtle but unmistakable to those who knew what to look for. It was shaped like a bat. Its single, microscopic lens was focused directly on the back of Izuku Midoriya's head, silently recording, streaming a high-definition feed to a dark cave on the other side of the world. Izuku Midoriya thought he had a secret. He was wrong. His secret now had a name, a code name entered into the world's most advanced criminal database. The world's greatest detective had found his target. The hunt had begun. The Batcave was a sanctum of absolute control. Every variable within its cold, cavernous expanse was accounted for, from the ambient temperature that protected the servers to the precise pH balance of the water that fed the colony of bats clinging to the ceiling. It was Bruce Wayne's world in microcosm, a place where chaos was catalogued, entropy was fought with logic, and randomness was treated as an enemy combatant. The anomaly from Mizurufu, Japan, was the ultimate expression of randomness. It was a wrench thrown into the gears of causality, and Batman intended to find the hand that threw it. The search radius is 1.2 square kilometers. Barbara Gordon's voice echoed slightly in the cavern, crisp and clear through the comms. From her own command center in the Gotham Clock Tower, she was his digital eyes and ears. Centered on the Nethama Internet Cafe. The tip was sent at 12:47 p.m. local time. The user was a male, estimated age between 13 and 19, based on the terminal's pressure-sensitive keyboard analysis, and a partial reflection from the monitor. On the main screen of the Bat computer, a satellite map of the district glowed. Dozens of buildings were highlighted. Too broad. Bruce's voice was a low growl, the sound of gravel grinding against stone. He stood before the console, arms crossed, his presence a void in the dim light. Cross-reference with municipal records. Schools, community centers, libraries. Places a teenager would frequent. The map shifted, data points blinking out of existence as the algorithm filtered them. A single building became the focal point, glowing a bright, insistent red. Aldera Junior High, Barbara said. It's 3 blocks away. School lets out for lunch at 12:30. It fits the timeline perfectly. Access the school's network, Bruce commanded. Already in, Barbara replied. And Bruce, their security is a joke. I could have done this with a toaster. Pulling student records now. A cascade of faces and files filled the screen. Teenagers, smiling awkwardly in their school photos. Names, quirks, grades. A sea of normalcy. We need to narrow it down, Bruce stated. Our subject is intelligent, meticulous, and understands stealth. Run personality profiles based on academic records, disciplinary actions, and any available digital footprints. On it. The files began to sort themselves. Students with high grades in analytics and logic-based subjects moved to one side. Students with disciplinary records for hacking or misuse of technology moved to another. He's also cautious, Bruce added, his mind working steps ahead. The use of a public terminal, the IP routing, he doesn't want to be found. Scan for students with minimal social media presence. A ghost, someone who intentionally stays off the grid. This new filter was the most effective. The majority of the profiles vanished. In an age of digital narcissism, a teenager without a public-facing online life was a statistical anomaly in itself. The list shrank from hundreds to a dozen, then to a mere handful, and then to one. A new file took center stage. The photo showed a boy with a wild mop of green-black hair, wide, frightened eyes, and a constellation of freckles across his cheeks. He looked like a startled forest creature, not a temporal manipulator. Name, Izuka Midoriya. Age, 14. Quirk, none. Bruce stared at the last word. Quirkless. That can't be right, Barbara said, her voice laced with surprise. A quirkless kid with precognition? That's a contradiction, or a clever deception, Bruce countered. He could have a passive mental quirk that's difficult to detect and registered as quirkless to avoid scrutiny. It's the perfect cover. No one looks twice at the powerless kid. He zoomed in on the boy's file. The details were sparse. Good grades, but not exceptional. No disciplinary record. No club affiliations. His digital footprint wasn't just minimal. It was non-existent. He was a perfect blank slate. It makes him a priority candidate, Bruce concluded. A quiet cough came from the entrance to the main platform. Alfred Pennyworth stood there, a silver tray in his hand bearing a cup of tea and a plate of sandwiches. He placed the tray on a clear space on the console, his expression carefully neutral as he glanced at the boy's face on the screen. Engaging in international surveillance of a minor, Master Bruce? Alfred asked, his tone dry. A new low, or merely a new Tuesday? He's a potential threat, Alfred, Bruce said, not taking his eyes from the screen. His actions prevented a death, but his existence could cause millions. The knowledge of the future is a power no one should have. He is also, by all appearances, a child, Alfred pressed gently. One who, from what I overheard, used this supposed power to save lives. Is it not the height of cynicism to view a heroic act as the precursor to a catastrophe? It's the height of preparedness, Bruce corrected him, his voice devoid of warmth. I don't have the luxury of hoping for the best. I plan for the worst, and the worst-case scenario for a person who can predict the future is a global extinction event. I will not allow that. He turned back to the computer. Babs, deploy the Nighthawks. 3 units are already airborne over Muzutafu, she confirmed. What's the protocol? Passive surveillance only. I want his routes, his habits, his associations. I want to know what he eats for breakfast, and what he dreams about at night, Bruce commanded. This boy, Izuka Midoriya, is now priority 1. I want to know everything. Alfred sighed softly, the sound lost in the vastness of the cave. He looked from the grim, determined set of his master's jaw to the frightened eyes of the boy on the screen. As you wish, sir, he said, and retreated back into the shadows, leaving Batman alone with his hunt. Paranoia was a slow-growing weed. For the first few days, Izuku dismissed it as trauma. The hypervigilance was a phantom limb, a remnant of his danger sense quirk echoing in his now powerless nervous system. The feeling of being watched was just the weight of his own terrible secrets. But the feeling didn't fade. It sharpened. It started with the small things, the kind of details only an obsessive analyst like him would ever notice. A streetlight on his route home flickered erratically for 2 days, then was suddenly fixed, its casing newer and slightly different in color. He started hearing a faint, high-frequency hum from the telephone pole outside his apartment window at night, a sound so high-pitched that when he asked his mother about it, she couldn't hear a thing. Then came the tourists. Musudafu was a big city, but it wasn't a major international tourist destination like Tokyo or Kyoto. Yet he began to see them, men and women, often dressed in bland, forgettable clothing, who seemed out of place. There was a woman with blonde hair reading an English-language newspaper on a park bench he passed every morning. A man with a square jaw and military-style haircut who always seemed to be lost and asking for directions near his school. He saw them once, then twice. They never interacted with him, never even seemed to look directly at him, but they were always there, in the periphery. Their presence was a constant, low-grade thrum of wrongness. His computer at home started acting strange, lagging at odd times. His mouse would occasionally stutter for a microsecond. He ran every virus scan he could find, but they all came back clean. It felt less like a bug and more like the system was under a heavy load from a program he couldn't see. His carefully constructed hope from preventing the bank robbery began to curdle into a cold, creeping dread. Someone knew. Someone was watching him. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place during a late-night research session. He was trying to find information on obscure foreign heroes, something to distract his racing mind. He fell down a rabbit hole of conspiracy theories and vigilante forums, sites he used to dismiss as pure fantasy. One thread was about a shadowy figure in America, a boogeyman from a city called Gotham. The descriptions were fragmented, often contradictory. Some said he was a myth. Others claimed he was a demon, or a man with a bat-themed quirk. But the more credible accounts, pieced together from blurry photos and alleged eyewitness reports, painted a terrifyingly consistent picture. A vigilante who operated outside the law, a master of stealth and fear. Someone who used advanced, almost sci-fi technology, silent drones, undetectable listening devices, a global information network that saw everything. He was a ghost, a detective, a hunter who always found his mark. The forum posters had a name for him. The Batman? Izuku stared at the screen, a single, grainy image of a dark figure perched on a gargoyle, the reins slicking his cape. His blood ran cold. The subtle surveillance. The untraceable technology. The feeling of being hunted by something methodical and intelligent. It wasn't a hero agency. It wasn't the police. It was him. The realization was a physical shock. He felt his breath catch in his chest, his stomach twisting into a knot of pure terror. Why? Why would a legendary American vigilante be interested in a quirkless middle schooler in Japan? The answer was immediate and horrifying. The anonymous tip. He had been too precise, too perfect. He hadn't just flagged a crime, he'd painted a target on his own back. He had revealed his hand to the one person on Earth equipped to understand its implications and ruthless enough to act on them. The Batman wasn't a hero coming to help. He was a predator, and Izuku was his prey. The knowledge changed everything. His mission to save the future was no longer just a race against time. It was now a game of cat and mouse against the world's greatest detective. Every move he made, every life he tried to save, would be another piece of evidence for the hunter stalking him from the shadows. He was trapped. And the next test, the most important one, was only 2 days away. The sludge villain was coming. And with him, All Might. The day dawned with an oppressive humidity that promised a sweltering afternoon. For anyone else in Musudafu, it was just another day. For Izuku, it was a fulcrum upon which his entire existence, past and future, pivoted. He walked through the city in a daze, the sounds of traffic and crowds muted by the screaming debate in his own head. The path was laid out before him like a roadmap to hell. He knew the alley the sludge villain would appear in. He knew the bottle All Might would trap him in. He knew the exact moment the bottle would be knocked from the hero's pocket. He knew the villain's desperation, and he knew the target of that desperation, Katsuki Bakugo. The dilemma was a three-headed hydra. First, the path of inaction. He could let it all play out exactly as it did before. He would watch Bakugo suffocate, be mocked by the heroes for his powerlessness, and then, in a moment of pure, selfless insanity, he would run in. That act of reckless heroism would capture All Might's attention. It would lead to the conversation on the rooftop, the revelation of One for All, and the offer that would define his life. It was the correct path. But to walk it meant willingly allowing Kakin to be tortured, to be used as a human puppet, to nearly die, all for his own benefit. The future hero he had become recoiled at the thought. It was a selfish, monstrous calculation. Second, the path of total intervention. He could use his knowledge. Send another anonymous tip. Warn the heroes. He could describe the villain perfectly, leading to his capture before he ever cornered him in that first alley. Bakugo would be safe. No one would be endangered. But there would be no catalyst. All Might would never see him. The question, can I be a hero without a quirk? Would never be asked. He would remain Izuku Midoriya, the quirkless boy with a head full of impossible memories, powerless to stop the coming storm. All for One would rise, Shigaraki would inherit his will, and the world would burn, just as it had before. This was an even more monstrous choice. That left only the third path. The tightrope. The surgical strike. He had to thread the needle. The event needed to happen. All Might needed to be there. But he couldn't let Bakugo suffer the way he did. He had to change the outcome, but not the circumstances. His heart hammered as he saw it, the crowd gathering, the smoke rising. He was here. He was on time. He pushed his way through the onlookers, his smaller frames slipping through gaps. The scene was just as he remembered. Fire, chaos, and the struggling, explosive form of Bakugo, his face a mask of rage and terror, being consumed by a monster of living sewage. The pro-heroes, Death Arms, Backdraft, Kamui Woods, were all there, all ineffective. His body is fluid. My attacks go right through him. Death Arms shouted, frustration etched on his face. Izuku's mind, a frantic supercomputer of future knowledge, raced. He remembered the post-incident analysis. The villain's body was mostly liquid, but his eyes and teeth were solid, the only vulnerable points. The heroes couldn't get a clear shot because Bakugo's constant, panicked explosions were kicking up too much dust and debris, obscuring the target. He needed to create a clear opening. A distraction? His eyes scanned the area, not as a panicked civilian, but as a seasoned strategist. He saw what the heroes, in their frantic state, were missing. 20 feet to the left of the chaos, a fire hydrant stood on the corner. Its maintenance cap was old, rusted. He knew from a future civil engineering report that this specific model had a design flaw. A sharp, precise impact to the side of the bolt could cause a catastrophic pressure failure. It was a 1 in a million shot. But his future was full of them. This was the way. He wouldn't be the hero. He wouldn't run in. He would be the catalyst for a hero. While all eyes were on the villain, Izuku slipped away from the front of the crowd, circling around the edge. He picked up a fist-sized chunk of asphalt, a piece of debris from the villain's rampage. His heart was a drum against his ribs. He took a deep, steadying breath, the air thick with smoke. He had one chance. He sprinted towards the hydrant, his movements clumsy but filled with a desperate purpose. He raised the rock, aimed for the large, rusted bolt on the side, and threw it with all the strength his wiry, 14-year-old body could muster. The rock struck true with a loud clang. For a second, nothing happened. Then, with a groan of tortured metal, the bolt sheared off. A jet of pressurized water erupted from the hydrant, not upwards, but sideways, a powerful, horizontal blast aimed directly at the villain's face. The sludge villain roared in surprise and pain as the high-pressure stream hit him directly in the eyes. The sudden, shocking impact caused him to flinch violently. His liquid body recoiled, and for a single, critical second, his hold on Bakugo loosened. The explosion stopped. The dust cloud cleared. It was the opening Death Arms needed. Now! The hero bellowed, seeing his chance. He lunged forward, his fist pistons of raw power, and landed a clean, devastating punch directly on the villain's exposed teeth. The solid matter cracked, and the villain's entire form seemed to destabilize, shrieking as his concentration broke. Bakugo fell to the ground, coughing and gasping for air. Free. The crowd erupted in cheers. Izuku didn't wait to see it. His part was done. As the civilians and news crews surged forward, a thunderous voice boomed from above, shaking the very air. "Have no fear!" Why? A massive figure landed, cracking the pavement. All Might, in all his sunbright glory, stood tall, his signature smile already in place. "Because I am here!" A part of Izuku, the starstruck fanboy, screamed with joy. But the traumatized soldier who wore his face knew better. He had to leave. Now, if All Might saw him, if they talked, if he was asked questions, it was too risky. The Batman was watching. He turned and fled, melting back into the panicked crowd, his head down, his heart a painful mix of triumph and terror. He'd done it. He'd saved Kaken without derailing his own origin. He'd threaded the needle. He ran, not looking back, unaware that his desperate act of subtle heroism had just sealed his fate. He didn't see the shadow of All Might leap away with the captured villain. He didn't see Bakugo being praised for his bravery. And he didn't see the tiny, insect-like drone perched on a nearby traffic light, its lens tracking his escape, capturing every second of his calculated intervention. In the Batcave, the scene played out on the main screen in crystal-clear high definition. Barbara and Bruce watched in silence. "Subject is on the scene," Barbara reported, her voice tense. They watched as Izuku Midoriya, a boy registered with no powers, assessed the battlefield with a tactical coolness that defied his age and status. They saw him ignore the heroes, ignore the villain, and identify a tertiary environmental factor. They saw the sprint, the calculated throw, the result. "Did you see that?" Barbara breathed, a note of awe in her voice. "The throw, the hydrant. It was a perfect bank shot. He created the opening for Death Arms. He saved the other kid's life." Batman didn't answer. His expression, visible even under the cowl, was stone. He replayed the footage, slowing it down, zooming in on Izuku's face. He saw the flicker of analysis, the grim determination, the utter lack of panic. This was not the random act of a scared child. It was the precise, deliberate action of a soldier. "He didn't just inform," Bruce said, his voice a low, chilling monotone. "He intervened. He actively and physically altered the course of a critical event. He neutralized the threat." "Bruce," Barbara argued, a flicker of defiance in her tone. "That's what heroes do." "He proved the hypothesis," Batman shot back, turning to face the screen as if it were the boy himself. "He confirmed he possesses knowledge of future events, and more importantly, the will to act on that knowledge. The risk is no longer theoretical. It's active." The first incident could have been a fluke. A lucky guess amplified by a good source. But this? This was confirmation. The boy wasn't a passive observer. He was an agent of temporal change, a walking, breathing paradox with the power to rewrite reality on a whim. The potential for misuse, intentional or not, was absolute. The Flash's warnings about the fragility of the timeline echoed in his mind. A single changed event could create ripples that drowned the world. This boy was throwing stones into the pond without understanding the tsunami he could cause. The mission parameters had to change. Passive surveillance was no longer sufficient. The threat was too great to be monitored from afar. He turned from the console, his cape sweeping behind him like a thundercloud. "Alfred," he said into his comms, his voice leaving no room for debate. "Ready the Batwing. Set a flight plan from Yuzurifu, Japan." "Sir?" Alfred's voice replied, laced with concern. "Is that entirely wise?" "It's necessary," Bruce stated. He strode across the metal platform, his heavy boots clanging with grim purpose. "The anomaly has a name. It has a face, and it has demonstrated a clear and present danger to temporal stability." He stopped at the foot of the sleek, black aircraft, its cockpit canopy glinting in the low light. He looked back at the screen one last time, at the image of the green-haired boy disappearing into a crowd, a ghost running from a destiny he himself had just rewritten. The hunt was no longer about observation. The time for watching was over. "The protocol is upgraded," Batman declared to the empty cavern. "From monitor to contain dot." Bruce Wayne was going to Japan. And he was going to collect. The adrenaline from the sludge villain incident had long since faded, leaving behind a residue of gnawing anxiety. Izuku had spent the past 2 days in a self-imposed prison of paranoia. He didn't deviate from his route to and from school by a single step. He kept his head down, his muttering silenced, his presence shrunk to the absolute minimum. He was a ghost haunting his own life, terrified that any sudden movement would attract the attention of the hawk he knew was circling overhead. He had succeeded. Bakugo was safe, All Might had appeared, and Izuku had escaped without being noticed. He'd threaded the needle, but the feeling of victory was hollow, soured by the certainty that he had only confirmed his hunter's suspicions. Each life he saved was another piece of evidence against him, another bar in a cage he couldn't yet see. Tonight, the air was thick and heavy, charged with the promise of a coming storm. The sky was a bruised purple, and the setting sun bled a final, lurid orange across the horizon. Izuku clutched the strap of his backpack, its familiar weight a small comfort against the vast, formless dread that clung to him. He walked faster than usual, eager for the flimsy security of his mother's apartment. The feeling of being watched was no longer a subtle prickle, it was a physical weight on his shoulders. The shadows in the alleyways seemed deeper, longer, and filled with a silent, waiting menace. He turned onto his street, a narrow residential road lined with modest apartment buildings and telephone poles tangled with wires. The streetlights flickered on one by one, casting pools of lonely, sodium yellow light. He was almost home. The thought offered little relief. A sudden change in the air pressure made the hairs on his arms stand up. It was the subtle whoosh of displaced air, a sound he knew intimately from 1,000 rooftop patrols with Gran Torino. It was the sound of a kite catching the wind. He froze, his heart seizing in his chest. A shadow detached itself from the deeper shadows of a building's rooftop across the street. It was vast, formless, a piece of the night sky given monstrous life. It descended not with a crash or a thud, but with the impossible silence of a falling leaf. For a moment, it was just a silhouette against the dying light, a terrifying effigy of horns and scalloped wings. Then it resolved into a solid form, landing on the asphalt 10 feet in front of him with a whisper of reinforced fabric. It was him. He was larger than any of the grainy photos had suggested. A giant carved from granite and shadow. The suit was a marvel of dark engineering, a tapestry of gray Kevlar and black armored plates. The cowl was a masterwork of psychological terror, its pointed ears sharp and aggressive, the eye lenses stark white and devoid of all emotion. The symbol on his chest, a stylized black bat, seemed to absorb the light around it. He was a myth made manifest, an urban legend that had crossed an ocean just for him. The Batman stood there, utterly still, a predator that had finally tired of stalking its prey. The world seemed to fall silent. The distant traffic, the hum of the city, the chirping of crickets, it all vanished, sucked into the vacuum of his presence. Then he spoke. The voice was even more terrifying than the silence. It wasn't a shout or a roar, it was a low, gravelly rumble, electronically filtered to be perfectly calm, perfectly controlled, and utterly devoid of mercy. You will come with me. Now, it wasn't a request. It was a statement of fact, an alteration of reality spoken into existence. Izuku's blood turned to ice. His mind, which had been a whirlwind of panic, suddenly went quiet and sharp. The traumatized soldier took over. Assess. Analyze. Survive. A physical confrontation was suicide. He was a quirkless, 14-year-old boy. The man in front of him was a physical specimen at the peak of human conditioning, wrapped in cutting-edge body armor. Fighting was not an option. Surrender was not an option. He had no idea what containment meant to a man like this, but he doubted it involved a comfortable bed and 3 square meals. That left only one viable path, flight. But how do you flee from a shadow? Izuku's mind, his only true weapon, began to fire on all cylinders. His encyclopedic knowledge wasn't just about quirks and heroes anymore. It was about tactics. He had studied this man in his past life, fascinated by the quirkless wonder who stood shoulder to shoulder with demigods. He knew his methods, his patterns, his obsessive, calculated precision, and in that precision lay a weakness. Batman was predictable because he was perfect. As Batman took a single, deliberate step forward, his hand moving towards his utility belt, Izuku's mouth opened. His voice was a trembling, reedy thing, but the words were sharp and clear. Smoke pellet at my feet to disorient me, he said, taking a reflexive step back. Batman froze for a fraction of a second, his hand hovering over a pouch. The white lenses of his cowl seemed to narrow. Then a grapple hook to the fire escape on the building to your left to cut off my upward escape route, Izuku continued, his voice gaining a sliver of confidence as he saw the flicker of hesitation in the vigilante's posture, followed by 3 standard-issue batarangs thrown in a triangular pattern to block my path down the street. 1 at head height, 2 at knee height. The Batman didn't move. The sheer impossibility of what he was hearing held him in place more effectively than any quirk could. It was as if the boy was reading a script of the fight before it had even begun. Izuku didn't wait for the delayed reaction. He used that single, precious moment of shock to act. He spun on his heel, not running down the street where the batarangs would have gone, but darting to his right, towards the narrow, trash-filled alley between 2 apartment buildings. The spell was broken. Batman moved with a speed that was simply inhuman. A small, gray cylinder arced through the air, landing precisely where Izuku had been standing a second before. It erupted in a thick, choking cloud of gray smoke. Izuku was already gone, diving into the mouth of the alley. The familiar thwip-zip of the grapple line fired, its claw biting into the rusted metal of the fire escape, exactly as he'd predicted. But his prediction had bought him a head start. He scrambled over a pile of overflowing trash bags, the stench of rotting garbage filling his lungs. The alley was a tight corridor of brick and grime. A dead end. He knew that. And he knew Batman knew it too. He reached the back wall, a sheer brick face 10 feet high, topped with barbed wire. Trapped. He could hear the heavy, rhythmic thud of armored boots closing in behind him. The massive shadow fell over him, blocking out the last of the twilight. It's over. Batman's voice rumbled, closer now, echoing in the narrow space. You'd think so. Izuku panted, his back pressed against the cold brick. He looked up, not at Batman, but at the wall behind him. But you analyzed the municipal blueprints for this area before you ever set foot in Japan. You know this is a dead end. What you don't know is that Mrs. Tanaka in apartment 2B has an illegal window-mounted air conditioning unit that drips condensation onto this specific section of the wall. He pointed to a dark, slick patch of moss and mildew on the bricks. The mortar here is weak. It has been for 6 years. Before Batman could process the torrent of nonsensical, hyper-specific information, Izuku slammed his shoulder into the weakened wall. It wasn't a feat of strength. It was an act of applied knowledge. The old mortar crumbled with a groan of protest. Bricks gave way, and he tumbled through the hole, not into another alley, but into the dark, musty-smelling maintenance corridor of the adjacent building. He landed on the concrete floor in a cloud of brick dust and scrambled to his feet. He could hear a surprised grunt from the other side of the wall, followed by the sound of more bricks being torn away as Batman simply smashed his way through. Izuku didn't wait. He sprinted down the corridor, his sneakers slapping against the dusty floor. He burst through a door at the far end and found himself in the building's sterile, fluorescent-lit lobby. An elderly couple stared at him, wide-eyed, as the dusty, disheveled boy ran past them and out the front doors. He was back on another street, parallel to his own. The chase was on. He ran, his lungs burning, his small legs pumping as fast as they could. This wasn't a chase of speed or power. He was a mouse, and the hawk was in the sky above. He heard the zip of the grapple line again and glanced up. The dark silhouette was airborne, soaring between buildings, a silent, gliding nightmare. He was faster, more efficient, and could move in 3 dimensions. Izuku was stuck on the ground. He couldn't outrun him. He had to outthink him. His mind became a map of the city, not as it was now, but as it would be. He remembered his future patrols, the routes he'd taken, the shortcuts he'd learned. He knew this district like the back of his hand, but the hand of a man 10 years from now. He veered sharply left, ignoring the wider, more direct street and plunging into a labyrinth of narrow, winding back streets. These were the veins and arteries of the city that tourists never saw. He took a right, then another left, his path a chaotic, seemingly random series of turns. But it wasn't random. He knew that the alley on the right, which looked like a shortcut, was actually a dead end that had been blocked by construction last year in his timeline, a fact not updated on any current city map. He knew the rooftop of the pachinko parlor was notoriously unstable due to water damage. He knew the security gate behind the bakery had a faulty locking mechanism that would jam if he tried to force it. He was using his future knowledge of urban decay and municipal neglect as his shield. From above, Batman watched the boy's erratic path. It made no logical sense. He wasn't taking the most direct route away. He seemed to be running in circles, but every time Batman adjusted his own trajectory to intercept, the boy would make another inexplicable turn, leading him into a cluttered, impassable alley or towards a roofline too steep to land on safely. The boy wasn't just running, he was hurting him. Izuku risked another glance up. The dark shape was closer now, preparing to descend. He needed a bigger diversion. Something to break the line of sight completely. His eyes landed on a major intersection ahead. The traffic lights. In his future, he had once helped with a citywide system upgrade after a villain with a technopathic quirk had caused chaos. He had been forced to memorize the master timing schedules for every traffic light in the Musitifa Central District. It was useless trivia then. It was his salvation now. The light for the cross traffic was red. He knew from memory it was on a 90-second cycle. It had 7 seconds left. The pedestrian sign was a flashing red hand. He didn't slow down. He poured every last ounce of energy into a final, desperate sprint, aiming directly for the crowded intersection. From his vantage point, Batman saw the boy's suicidal trajectory. He was going to run directly into a stream of oncoming traffic. He adjusted his grapple, preparing to swoop down and snatch him from the path of a speeding truck. It was a reckless, desperate move from a panicked child. 3, 2, 1. Just as Izuku's foot hit the edge of the crosswalk, the lights changed. The perpendicular traffic screeched to a halt. The lane he was in turned a brilliant green. A wave of cars, trucks, and buses surged forward, a wall of moving steel creating an impenetrable screen between him and the sky. He weaved through the first few cars, the horns blaring around him, and then he saw his goal. The wide, welcoming mouth of a subway station entrance. He dove down the stairs, taking them 3 at a time, his momentum carrying him past the ticket gates. He stumbled onto the crowded platform just as a train slid to a halt, its doors hissing open. The platform was a sea of people, students, office workers, shoppers, all anonymous, all a perfect camouflage. He pushed his way into a packed car, squeezing himself between a large man in a suit and a woman with a shopping bag. The doors chimed and hissed shut. The train lurched forward, plunging into the darkness of the tunnel. He was safe. For now. He leaned against the cool glass of the window, his body trembling, his breath coming in ragged, painful gasps. He had escaped. He had done the impossible. He had outmaneuvered the Batman, but the victory felt terrifyingly temporary. He hadn't won. He had only delayed the inevitable. Batman wouldn't give up. He would recalibrate, reassess, and come back harder. Izuku couldn't keep running forever. He was alone, hunted by one of the most dangerous men on the planet. His secret was a beacon, and his heroism was the proof. He couldn't go to the police. He couldn't go to a famous hero like Endeavor. He'd be dismissed or, worse, handed over. He needed an ally, not a symbol. Not a celebrity. He needed someone who understood the shadows. Someone for whom logic and efficiency trumped fame and public opinion. Someone who operated on the fringes, just like the man who was hunting him. His exhausted mind sifted through the roster of pro-heroes he knew. The list was short. Most underground heroes were lone wolves by nature. But there was one. A man who was also a teacher. A man whose entire philosophy was based on rational deception and practicality. A man who would demand proof but would listen to logic if it was sound. Shota Aizawa. Eraserhead. The train rattled on, carrying him deeper into the city's underbelly. A new plan began to form in the ruins of the last one. He needed a burner phone. He needed an untraceable line. And he needed bait, not for a villain, but for a hero. He needed to prove he was worth the immense risk of helping. He dug into his pocket, his fingers closing around the few yen coins he had left. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make a phone call. He got off at the next station, a nameless stop in a district he didn't know. He found a payphone, a relic from a bygone era, and fumbled with the coins. He knew the public tip line for Yui High School by heart. It was a long shot. A desperate, hopeless plea thrown out into the darkness. But it was the only one he had. He began to compose the message in his head. It had to be like the first one. Concise. Precise. Impossible to ignore. He would give Aizawa the details of an underground drug ring operating near the school, a ring the police had been trying to bust for months. He knew their supplier, their main stash house, their distribution schedule. It was information he'd learned from a minor villain he'd interrogated years from now, and then, he would add his plea. The real reason for the message. As he stood in the flickering light of the train station, the sounds of the city a distant roar, he felt a profound sense of isolation. He was a man out of time, a soldier fighting a war no one else could see. He had escaped the clutches of a hero who saw him as a monster. Now, he had to convince another hero that he wasn't. The chase was over. The negotiation was about to begin. In a darkened suite at the top of the most expensive hotel in Muzurifu, Bruce Wayne stood before a panoramic window overlooking the glittering city. The Batman costume was gone, replaced by a tailored silk robe. The cowl was off, revealing a face etched with frustration and a deep, simmering anger. On a nearby laptop, Barbara Gordon's face was on a secure video call. I lost him, Bruce. He went into the subway system. There are over a dozen lines, hundreds of stations. Facial recognition is running, but in that crowd, he's a needle in a haystack made of needles. He didn't just run, Bruce said, his voice a low growl. He predicted my every move. The smoke pellet, the grapple, the batarangs. He knew my tactics before I employed them. He recited them to me. That's not possible, Barbara said, her own analytical mind struggling to compute the data. Even with precognition, that level of tactical foresight against an unknown opponent is unheard of. He said something else. Bruce continued, turning from the window. He paced the room, a caged predator. In the alley? He knew about the faulty mortar. He cited a specific apartment number and a resident's name. It was a flood of useless, perfect information. He's not just seeing a vague future. He has access to a database of facts. It's like he's lived it already. The implication hung in the air between them, too fantastic to be spoken aloud. Time travel wasn't a theory. It was a reality men like the Flash had proven, with catastrophic consequences. The chase itself, Bruce went on. His route was illogical but effective. He was avoiding my interception paths before I even committed to them. And the traffic light, that wasn't luck. The timing was too perfect. He knew the city's infrastructure schedule. He stopped pacing. He's not just a precog, Babs. He's a strategist. A highly effective one. He beat me. It was a rare admission, and it tasted like ash in his mouth. So what's our next move? Barbara asked softly. We can't just grab him off the street. He's proven he's too slippery for that. And if he knows our tactics, we change the board, Bruce said, his eyes hardening. He fled into the city's network. He's a ghost in the machine now. But he's still a child. He's scared. He's alone. He's going to make a mistake. He's going to reach out to someone. He walked back to the laptop, his shadow looming large in the room. Monitor all heroic and police communication channels in the Muzurifu Prefecture. All tip lines, all official channels, all back channels. Widen the net. He's looking for an ally. And when he finds one, a grim, predatory smile touched the edge of his lips. It was a chilling sight. We'll be waiting. Shota Aizawa hated coincidences. In his line of work, a coincidence was either a sign of sloppy planning on the part of a criminal or, far more often, a sign of meticulous planning on the part of a far more dangerous one. Coincidences got heroes killed. They were statistical noise that, upon closer inspection, often resolved into a symphony of conspiracy. So when an anonymous, untraceable tip came through the UA public tip line, a line usually choked with crackpot theories from hero fanatics and desperate pleas for All Might to sign someone's t-shirt, he was immediately suspicious. The message hadn't been flagged by the school's standard security filters, which was the first red flag. It had been routed through a complex series of dead-end servers before arriving, a ghost message with no point of origin. Professional. The content, however, was what truly arrested his attention. To UA Hero Core Staff, attention, Eraserhead. Subject, The Serpent's Kiss Syndicate, urgent intel. Source, untraceable. The Serpent's Kiss drug ring operating out of the Kamiji Ward docks is scheduled for a major supply drop tonight at 2:17 a.m. The supplier is a mid-level Yakuza enforcer named Ruji the Eel. Location, Warehouse 7B, West End Loading Bay. Contingency, the syndicate leader, a woman known as Viper, possesses a paralytic toxin quirk delivered by touch. Her gloves are unlined. She never removes them. Her second-in-command, a man named Goro, has a minor earth manipulation quirk, allowing him to create dust clouds from concrete floors for cover. He is highly asthmatic. Aerosolized irritants are extremely effective. Police have the wrong warehouse under surveillance. They are watching Warehouse 9A. The Serpent's Kiss knows this and is using it as a decoy. This information is accurate. Use it. It was an impossibly detailed intelligence briefing. The police had been trying to get a solid lead on the Serpent's Kiss for over a year. They were a slippery, ghost-like organization responsible for flooding the city's underground with a dangerous quirk-enhancing narcotic. Aizawa himself had pursued a few of their low-level dealers, but the core of the group remained elusive. This message laid out their entire command structure and a critical operation on a silver platter. It was too good to be true. And then there was the final, chilling addendum, a postscript that changed the entire context of the message from a simple tip to a desperate plea. P.S. I am being hunted by an American vigilante. I know things. He thinks I'm a threat. I am not. Please help. Aizawa read the message 3 times, his perpetually tired eyes narrowing. An American vigilante. The description was vague, but it didn't need to be specific. In the underground hero community, there were legends, whispers of a boogeyman from a city called Gotham. A quirkless man who fought gods and monsters with nothing but fear, technology, and an indomitable will. Most dismissed him as a myth, an urban legend. Aizawa, a pragmatist to his core, had always believed that where there was smoke, there was fire. This entire situation reeked of high-level espionage and conspiracy far beyond a simple drug bust. The rational, logical part of his brain, the part that had kept him alive for years in the dark underbelly of hero society, screamed at him to delete the message, scrub the server, and forget he ever saw it. It was not his problem. It was a problem for the Hero Public Safety Commission, for international diplomats. But Aizawa was not just a hero. He was a teacher. And the message, for all its professional coldness, ended with the word, help. It was a child's plea wrapped in a spy's communique. The dissonance was too great to ignore. He made a decision. It was illogical, reckless, and almost certainly stupid. He forwarded the drug bust intel to his police contact, Detective Tsukachi, stripping out the postscript and claiming the source was one of his own low-level informants. Then, he replied to the anonymous sender. The message was short, a single line that was both a test and an offer. To Anonymous, from Eraserhead, subject re The Serpent's Kiss. Derelict Warehouse District. Kodo Ward. Midnight. Come alone. He hit send and then leaned back in his worn office chair, rubbing his tired eyes. He was either about to walk into an elaborate trap or step into a mess that would make a nest of Noma look tidy. Either way, his night was ruined. The Kodo Ward Warehouse District was a graveyard of industry. Rusting steel skeletons clawed at the night sky, their corrugated metal skins peeling like sunburnt flesh. The air was salty and damp, thick with the smell of decay and stagnant water. It was the perfect place for a clandestine meeting, isolated, with clear sight lines and 1,000 places to hide. Izuku arrived 20 minutes early, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. He had spent the last of his money on a cheap burner phone to receive the reply. The single sentence had filled him with a terrifying mixture of hope and dread. He came. He's listening. But this was Eraserhead. The man was a master of stealth and ambush. He wouldn't be standing in the open. Izuku knew, from personal experience in his past life, that Aizawa was already here, watching. He stood in the center of a wide, moonlit clearing, surrounded by the hulking shadows of the warehouses. He deliberately made himself a target, a small, vulnerable figure in the vast emptiness. He had to show trust to earn it. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. The only sounds were the wind whistling through broken windows and the distant lap of water against the docks. Then, a voice, dry and bored, spoke from the darkness directly behind him. "You're either very brave or very stupid to show up here, kid." Izuku didn't jump. He had been expecting it. He turned slowly, his hands held open and away from his body. Shota Aizawa dropped from the girders of the warehouse behind him, landing as silently as a cat. He was just as Izuku remembered him, a man who looked like he just rolled out of bed after a 3-day bender. His black jumpsuit was practical and worn, his capture weapon, a scarf made of a steel wire alloy woven with carbon nanofibers, was draped loosely around his neck, and his eyes were bloodshot and heavy-lidded. He looked less like a pro-hero and more like a sleep-deprived wraith. "You came," Izuku said, his voice barely a whisper. "The intel was good," Aizawa stated, his gaze sweeping over Izuku, taking in the cheap school uniform, the scuffed sneakers, the wild green hair. He saw a child. A scared, trembling child. His suspicion deepened. Sakachi and his team just wrapped it up. They arrested the entire Serpent's Kiss upper echelon. Clean sweep. Intel was perfect. He took a step closer, his eyes hard and analytical. Too perfect. So let's skip the games. Who are you, and who do you work for? I don't work for anyone, Izuku said, forcing himself to meet the hero's intense gaze. My name is Izuku Midoriya, and you just happen to have intimate knowledge of a clandestine criminal organization that has evaded the police for a year? Aizawa's tone was laced with disbelief. Unlikely. Are you HPSC? CIA? Some new Black Ops division they forgot to tell me about. No. I'm just me, Aizawa sighed, a long, weary sound of pure exasperation. Kid, I don't have time for this. I'm tired, I have papers to grade, and I just risked my neck based on your word. You're going to start talking, and it's going to be the truth, or this conversation is over. This was the moment. The burden of proof. Izuku took a deep breath, his mind racing. He couldn't tell him the whole truth. I was sent back in time. Was a one-way ticket to a padded cell. He had to provide evidence. Irrefutable, impossible evidence. Your quirk is erasure. Izuku began, his voice steady now, the analyst taking over. It allows you to temporarily cancel the quirk of anyone you can see, as long as you don't blink. Its primary weakness is that it causes severe dry eye with prolonged use, forcing you to carry eye drops. Your capture weapon is highly effective against most opponents, but it's vulnerable to anyone with a blade generation quirk who can sever the strands. You rely on a highly mobile, acrobatic fighting style that leverages your opponent's momentum against them, a style you develop to compensate for your quirk's lack of offensive capability. You call it rational deception. Aizawa went utterly still. His bored, tired demeanor vanished, replaced by a razor-sharp focus. Every detail Izuku had just listed was accurate, but none of it was public knowledge. His quirk's weakness, the specifics of his fighting style, that was information known only to a handful of trusted colleagues and Principal Nizu. How do you know that? Aizawa's voice was dangerously quiet. I know a lot of things. Izuku pressed on, his own heart hammering. He had to clinch it. For example, I know that in approximately 45 seconds, a drunk driver in a blue sedan is going to run the red light at the intersection of Kodo and Hamadori, 3 blocks from here. He will T-bone a delivery truck carrying frozen fish. There will be no fatalities, but the driver of the sedan will suffer a broken arm, and the street will be covered in mackerel. Aizawa stared at him, his expression a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror. The sheer, banal specificity of the prediction was more convincing than any grand prophecy could ever be. He didn't say a word. He just stood there, waiting, his eyes locked on Izuku. The seconds ticked by in agonizing silence. Izuku counted in his head. 42. 43, 44. A distant, jarring screech of tires tore through the night, followed by a loud, metallic crump. A moment later, the faint sound of a car horn began to blare, stuck and incessant. Aizawa's blood ran cold. He pulled out his phone, his thumb moving quickly. He brought up a live feed from the city's traffic cameras, a privilege afforded to pro-heroes. He found the intersection. The scene was exactly as the boy had described. A blue sedan, its front end crumpled, smashed into the side of a delivery truck. The truck's back doors had burst open, and the road was littered with boxes and hundreds of silvery, glistening fish. He looked up from his phone, his face pale in the moonlight. He stared at the boy, this small, trembling child who looked like he was on the verge of tears but who spoke with the chilling certainty of a god. He didn't understand how. Magic, a quirk, technology, it didn't matter. The boy was telling the truth. Who is hunting you? Aizawa asked, his voice now low and serious, all traces of skepticism gone. The Batman. Izuku whispered the name, and he saw a flicker of recognition in Aizawa's eyes. He knows. He knows I can see what's coming. He chased me. He thinks I'm a weapon or a bomb. He wants to contain me. Aizawa processed this, his mind reeling. The legendary American vigilante was in his city, hunting a child who could apparently predict the future down to the last frozen mackerel. The situation had escalated from illogical to full-blown apocalyptic insanity. His instincts, his logic, every rational fiber of his being told him to run, to take the boy to the HPSC, hand him over, and wash his hands of this entire mess. But then he looked at Izuku. He didn't just see a temporal anomaly or a strategic asset. He saw a kid, a terrified kid who was carrying a burden that would crush a seasoned pro hero, let alone a 14-year-old. He saw the dark circles under his eyes, the tremor in his hands, the profound, soul-deep exhaustion that went far beyond their rooftop chase. This wasn't a choice between logic and illogic anymore. It was a choice between his duty and his humanity. All right, kid. Aizawa sighed, the sound carrying the weight of his decision. You're a problem. A huge, walking, talking, timeline-breaking problem. He ran a hand through his messy black hair. But you're my problem now. Aizawa's concept of a safe house was less a house and more a concrete box that prioritized function over any semblance of comfort. It was a small, sparsely furnished apartment in a rundown building on the far side of the city. The windows were reinforced with mesh, there was only one entrance, and the walls were soundproofed. It was anonymous, defensible, and utterly depressing. It was perfect. You'll stay here, Aizawa instructed, his tone all business. Don't use the internet. Don't use the phone. Don't go outside. I'll bring you food. As far as the world is concerned, Izuku Midoriya doesn't exist for a while. For the next week, Izuku lived in the gray twilight of the safe house. The relief of having an ally was immense, but it was quickly replaced by the crushing weight of his memories. The quiet and isolation gave his trauma room to breathe, and it was suffocating him. He barely slept. When he did, the nightmares came. He was back in the war, the air thick with the smell of burning flesh and cement dust. He saw Sir Night-Eye impaled, his own future torn from his hands. He saw Midnight atomized by Mr. Compress. He saw the look of betrayal on Lady Nagin's face. He saw the ruins of Ue, the last bastion of hope, crumbling under Gigantomachia's assault. Over and over, he relived the death of Bakugo, the searing heat of the explosion that should have been his, the final, choked apology from his oldest friend and rival. He would wake up screaming, his throat raw, his cheap t-shirt soaked in sweat, the ghost of one for all's power a phantom itch in his limbs. Aizawa would often be there when he woke, sitting in a chair in the corner of the room, watching him with those tired, observant eyes. He never asked about the nightmares. He would just wordlessly hand him a bottle of water, his presence a silent, grounding anchor in the storm of Izuku's mind. The hero's role began to shift. He wasn't just a reluctant protector anymore. He was becoming a mentor. He saw the immense psychological toll this knowledge was taking on the boy. This wasn't just a strategic problem. It was a rescue mission for a drowning soul. He started to train him. Your knowledge is a weapon, Aizawa said one afternoon, tossing a balled-up sock at Izuku, who caught it by pure reflex. But your body is a liability. You can't rely on predicting your way out of every fight. Your hunter is the pinnacle of non-powered combat. You need skills. Practical skills. Their training was nothing like the grueling regimen he'd undergone with All Might. This wasn't about building power. It was about managing weakness. Aizawa taught him the art of the underground hero. He taught him stealth, how to use shadows and noise to move unseen. He taught him misdirection, how to control an opponent's focus, forcing them to look where you want them to. He taught him evasion, parkour, how to read an urban environment not as a series of obstacles, but as a network of pathways. He drilled him relentlessly on situational awareness, forcing him to identify escape routes, potential weapons, and environmental advantages in every room. The hunter you're facing, Aizawa told him, his voice grim, doesn't just walk into a room. He's already thought of a dozen ways to win a fight in it before he even crosses the threshold. You need to learn to think the same way. Izuku absorbed it all with a desperate ferocity. He was a sponge, his analytical mind perfectly suited to the cold, hard logic of Aizawa's methods. He was still weak, still quirkless, but for the first time since he'd woken up in the past, he began to feel a sliver of control. He wasn't just a victim of his knowledge anymore. He was learning how to wield it. In his Gotham penthouse, Bruce Wayne was growing frustrated. It had been over a week. The boy, Izuku Midoriya, had vanished. He hadn't returned to his home. He hadn't attended school. His mother had filed a missing persons report, which was being treated with bafflingly low priority by the local police, a sure sign of intervention from a higher authority. The boy had dropped off the face of the earth. He has help, Bruce growled, staring at the blank screen of the tracker. I've been digging. Barbara's voice came from the laptop. The night he disappeared, the Muzutafa PD, assisted by an unnamed pro-hero, conducted a major raid on the Serpent's Kiss drug syndicate. The tip that led to the raid was, according to my sources, anonymous and untraceable. Bruce's eyes narrowed. The same MO. He traded information for Sanctuary. Exactly. Barbara confirmed. I cross-referenced all pro-heroes known to have been involved or consulted on the Serpent's Kiss case with those who have a history of underground operations and a reputation for discretion. The list is short, but one name stands out. A file appeared on the screen. It was a grainy photo of a man with long, unkempt black hair and a capture weapon wrapped around his neck. Hero name, Eraserhead. Civilian name, Shota Aizawa. Affiliation, Yue High School. Quirk, Erasure. He's an underground hero and a teacher at Japan's top hero school. Barbara elaborated. He's known for being logical, pragmatic, and operates almost exclusively outside the public eye. He's the perfect candidate for a paranoid, time-traveling teenager to approach. Bruce stared at Aizawa's file. The problem had just become exponentially more complicated. This wasn't a simple containment of a civilian anomaly anymore. The boy now had a protector, a licensed pro-hero with the resources and legal standing of a major institution like UA at his back. A direct confrontation on foreign soil with a pro-hero would be a diplomatic disaster, a breach of international hero accords that could spark a major incident. He couldn't go after the boy directly. Not while he was under Aizawa's protection. He needed leverage. He needed to force the boy out of hiding. He began to pace again, his mind sifting through the torrent of information Izuku had inadvertently given him during the chase. The impossible predictions, the tactical knowledge, it all pointed to one thing, a deep, intimate understanding of the hero world. And who was at the center of Japan's hero world? Who was the pillar upon which their entire society rested? All Might. The boy's initial intervention at the sludge villain incident had revolved around him. It was the key. He didn't know how or why, but he was certain that the boy's most valuable, most dangerous secret was connected to the symbol of peace. If he could threaten All Might, even with a fabricated danger, the boy's heroic martyr complex would force him to act. He would break cover. He would expose himself. The Cassandra Protocol had failed. It was time for a new strategy. It was time to set a trap. And the bait would be the most powerful hero on Earth. The Watchtower was a monument to hope, a gleaming sentinel suspended in the silent void between the Earth and the Moon. From its panoramic windows, the world below was a serene marble of blue, white, and green, a fragile jewel hanging in the velvet blackness of space. It was a place of gods, a bastion against cosmic threats and world-ending cataclysms. The circular chamber at its heart, the meeting room of the Justice League, had hosted debates that decided the fate of galaxies. Today, however, the threat being discussed was not an invading alien fleet or a reality-warping sorcerer. It was a 14-year-old boy with freckles and a secret. The air in the chamber was thick with tension. 7 figures occupied the massive, circular table, their iconic symbols glowing softly on the high-backed chairs before them. At the head of the table, Superman, Clark Kent, listened with a deep frown, his powerful arms crossed over the simple, bold S on his chest. Beside him, Wonder Woman, Diana of Themyscira, regarded the central holographic display with an expression of regal concern, her warrior's intuition sensing a discordance in the cosmic balance. Across from them, the Flash, Barry Allen, was anything but still. He vibrated slightly in his seat, a human tuning fork of nervous energy. His hands were clasped tightly on the table, his knuckles white. Of all of them, he understood the stakes most intimately. He had broken time once, and the ghosts of that shattered world still haunted him. Aquaman, Arthur Curry, listened with a king's stoicism, while Martian Manhunter, John Johns, observed the proceedings with an unnerving, telepathic calm. The Green Lantern, Hal Jordan, leaned back in his chair, a skeptical eyebrow raised, his mind accustomed to dealing with more tangible threats you could punch. And then there was Batman. He stood, a pillar of shadow and grim resolve, narrating the events of the past few weeks in his low, gravelly monotone. The central hologram displayed everything: the initial anonymous tip, the analysis of its statistical impossibility, the profile of Izuku Midoriya, and finally, crystal-clear footage from his Cowl's recorder of the rooftop chase. They watched in stunned silence as the small boy predicted Batman's every move, outmaneuvered him with impossible knowledge of the city's infrastructure, and vanished into the subway. He is now under the protection of a Japanese pro-hero, Shota Aizawa, codename Eraserhead. Batman concluded, his voice flat. Direct action is now a diplomatic risk. That is why I have brought this to the League. A heavy silence descended upon the room. It was Superman who broke it first, his voice a warm, resonant baritone filled with an innate compassion that seemed to push back against the coldness of Batman's report. "Bruce, he's a child," he said, his blue eyes fixed on the frozen image of Izuku's panicked face. "Everything you've shown us, the bank robbery, the sludge villain, he's using this ability to save people. He's acting heroically. Why are we treating him like a supervillain?" "Because of the potential, Clark," Batman countered, his tone unyielding. "The road to hell is paved with good intentions. Today, he saves a family. Tomorrow, he might try to prevent a war by assassinating a world leader he knows will start one. He holds the future hostage. His very existence is a threat to the integrity of the timeline. A threat you have no proof he will ever pose," Superman argued, leaning forward. His voice, though still calm, carried the weight of his conviction. "We can't condemn someone for a crime they might commit. That's not justice. That's tyranny. We should approach him. Talk to him. Offer him our help, our guidance. He's clearly scared and alone. He needs allies, not jailers." Wonder Woman, who had been silent until now, spoke, her voice carrying the wisdom of ages. "There is a danger here that transcends mortal laws, Kal-El. The fates weave the tapestry of destiny for a reason. To possess the knowledge of its design is a burden no mortal was ever meant to bear. It is a power that corrupts absolutely, not through malice, but through the hubris of believing one can improve upon fate's grand design." Her gaze fell upon Batman. "But I also agree that hunting a child like a wild animal is beneath us. His knowledge is a sickness. We should approach him as healers, not as executioners." Suddenly, Barry Allen slammed his hand on the table, the sound cracking through the tense atmosphere. All eyes turned to him. His face was pale, his expression haunted. "You don't get it," he said, his voice trembling with a raw, visceral fear that silenced the room. "None of you. You're talking about potential and philosophy. I'm telling you about reality. I've seen it. I've done it." He stood up, pacing behind his chair, his movements a blur of red and gold. "I went back in time to save one person. My mother. One single life. It seemed so simple, so pure. A son's love, and when I came back, the world was a nightmare. Atlantis and Themyscira were at war, millions were dead, Europe was underwater. Bruce, your father was the Batman, and your mother, she became the Joker. My best friend, Cyborg, was a government weapon. Superman didn't exist. I broke the world by trying to fix one tiny piece of it." He stopped pacing, his eyes wild as he looked at each of them. This kid, he's not just changing one thing. He's changing dozens. The bank, the villain attack, he's pulling at threads without seeing the whole tapestry unravel. He thinks he's saving people, but he could be erasing them from existence. He could be creating futures 1,000 times worse than the one he's trying to prevent. Every life he saves might cost 1 million more down the line. We can't let him continue. It's not about punishing him. It's about saving everyone from the consequences of his heroism. The Flash's words hung in the air, heavy and cold. The memory of Flashpoint was a scar on the League's soul, a testament to the catastrophic danger of temporal meddling. Superman's compassionate argument seemed to wither in the face of such stark, experiential horror. It was the opening Batman needed. He stepped forward, his shadow falling across the table. "Barry is right," he said, his voice a low, commanding rumble. "The risk of inaction is annihilation. We cannot allow a single, unstable individual to hold this power. My initial assessment was correct. He must be contained." He brought up a new file on the holographic display. It was a complex schematic of a state-of-the-art containment facility, designed for beings of immense and unusual power. "I have formulated a contingency plan for this type of threat. I call it the Cassandra Protocol." The name sent a chill through the room. Cassandra, the prophetess of Greek myth, blessed with the gift of foresight but cursed to never be believed, her accurate warnings of Troy's destruction falling on deaf ears. "The protocol is simple," Batman continued, his voice devoid of emotion. "Total isolation. The subject will be brought to a secure, off-the-grid facility. He will be treated humanely, given every comfort, but he will have no contact with the outside world. No internet, no news, no communication. His knowledge of the future will be contained within those walls, where it can do no harm. We will interview him, extract what information we can to prepare for credible threats, but the control of that information must remain with us." "You want to put a child in a box for the rest of his life?" Superman asked, his voice thick with disbelief and disgust. "I want to save the world from a walking extinction event," Batman retorted coldly. "His knowledge is too dangerous. If a villain ever got to him, if All for One, or Brainiac, or Darkseid ever learned of his existence and extracted what he knows, it would be the end. All of it. This isn't about punishment, Clark. It's about quarantine. He is the carrier of the most dangerous plague imaginable, a future that can be weaponized." He looked around the table, his white lenses seeming to pierce through each of them. "We cannot afford to be sentimental. The lives of billions outweigh the freedom of one boy. The Cassandra Protocol is the only logical, rational, and safe course of action. I need the League's consensus to move forward, to bypass the diplomatic incident with the Japanese government, and retrieve the asset." The room was silent once more, the weight of the decision pressing down on them. The heroes, the symbols of hope and freedom, were being asked to sanction the indefinite imprisonment of a child who had, thus far, done nothing but good. It was a choice between their core principles and the terrifying, logical pragmatism of their darkest night. It was a choice with no right answer. Izuku's world had shrunk to the 4 gray walls of Aizawa's safe house. The days bled into one another, a monotonous cycle of training, eating the tasteless nutrient bars his protector provided, and trying, fruitlessly, to outrun the ghosts in his head. The nightmares were relentless, a nightly crucible that left him hollowed out and trembling. Aizawa was a constant, steadying presence. He was not a warm man. He did not offer comforting words or paternal hugs. His brand of care was practical, grounded. He pushed Izuku's body to its limits during their training sessions, forcing his mind to focus on the immediate, physical reality of a controlled fall or a disarming maneuver, giving him precious moments of respite from the apocalyptic memories. One evening, after a particularly grueling session on stealth movement that left Izuku bruised and exhausted, Aizawa tossed him a bottle of water and sat down on the edge of the cheap mattress. "You never talk about it," the hero said, his voice unusually soft. "The future. The nightmares." Izuku flinched, wrapping his arms around his knees. "There's nothing to talk about. It's over. It didn't happen. It happened to you," Aizawa countered, his gaze unwavering. "It's happening to you right now, every time you close your eyes. A burden is lighter when it's shared, kid. even if the person you're sharing it with can't fully understand it. The simple, uncharacteristic display of empathy cracked the dam Izuku had so carefully constructed around his heart. A choked sob escaped his lips. The hero who had faced down armies and monsters was, in the end, still a boy who missed his friends. "I saw them die," Izuku whispered, the words tasting like poison. "All of them. I saw heroes I looked up to my whole life, just erased. Midnight Sensei, she was so kind to me. Mr. Compress, He couldn't finish the sentence. He squeezed his eyes shut, but the images were seared onto the inside of his eyelids. I saw my friends, Ida, Todoroki, Achiko, fighting and bleeding, and I was supposed to be the one to protect them. I had the power of 9 generations of heroes inside me. I was supposed to be the next symbol of peace." His voice broke, filled with a self-loathing so profound it was almost a physical presence in the room. "But I wasn't enough. I failed. I failed all of them." The most vivid memory, the one that haunted him most, clawed its way to the surface. Shigaraki. All for one successor, his quirk, decay, it evolved. He could destroy everything with a touch, without even needing to make direct contact. He was a walking cataclysm. In the end, he was going for Achiko, and Kaken. He took a shuddering breath. Bakugo, all our lives he was Kaken. Arrogant, loud, cruel. But he changed. He grew. He became a hero. A real hero. And in the end, he pushed me out of the way. He took the hit that was meant for me. His last words, he apologized. For everything. Tears streamed freely down his face now, silent and hot. He was not just mourning their deaths. He was mourning their lives, the futures they had been stolen from, the people they would have become. Aizawa listened in silence, his expression unreadable. He had dealt with traumatized victims his entire career, but this was different. This boy wasn't suffering from post-traumatic stress, he was suffering from pre-traumatic stress. He was grieving for a ghost world, a world that was both chillingly real and utterly non-existent. The psychological weight of it was unimaginable. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He didn't say, "It'll be okay." Instead, he stated a simple, logical fact. "That future isn't written in stone anymore, Midoriya," he said, his voice firm. "You changed it the moment you sent that first tip. The people you're mourning are alive. They're in your class, they're training to be heroes. You haven't failed them. Your war hasn't even started yet, and this time," he added, placing a hand briefly on Izuku's shoulder, a rare and powerful gesture of support. "You won't be fighting it alone." The words didn't magically heal the wounds, but they were a balm. They were a promise. Izuku looked up at his tired, disheveled teacher, and for the first time, he saw not just a protector or a mentor, but a true ally. The crushing weight on his soul didn't disappear, but it lessened, just enough for him to breathe. The debate in the watchtower had raged for hours. The sun had long since set on the sun-facing side of the earth, and still, they were at an impasse. Superman's faction, arguing for compassion and diplomacy, was stonewalled by Batman's and the Flash's, who argued for decisive, preventative action. The others were caught in the middle, torn between their ideals and the terrifying logic of the Cassandra Protocol. There must be another way, Wonder Woman insisted, her patience wearing thin. We are the Justice League. We do not imprison children on the basis of what they might do. We also don't allow ticking time bombs to wander the planet freely. Batman shot back, his frustration palpable. He is a security risk of the highest order. His knowledge of our identities, our weaknesses, the political secrets of every nation on Earth. He is the ultimate skeleton key, and right now, he is in the hands of a single pro-hero who is completely out of his depth. We need to control the situation. Now, John Johns, who had remained silent for most of the debate, finally spoke, his voice calm and resonant in their minds. Perhaps there is a misunderstanding of the core issue. We are debating the nature of the boy's power, but we do not yet understand it. Is it a quirk? Is it magic? Is it, as the footage suggests, something more? To act without full knowledge is illogical. We don't have time to study him like a lab rat, John, Barry interjected. Every second we wait is another chance for him to pull a thread and unravel everything. The argument was circular, a snake eating its own tail. It was then that Batman, seeing the deadlock, decided to play his final card. He had hoped to gain a consensus for the Cassandra Protocol, but if he couldn't have that, he would settle for the freedom to act on his own. There is another factor, he said, his voice dropping, drawing their attention. One I have not yet shared. He manipulated the holographic display. The files on Izuku vanished, replaced by medical charts, X-rays, and classified government health reports. At the center of it all was a picture of a skeletal, almost corpse-like man with sunken eyes and sharp, blonde bangs. It was All Might's secret form. A shocked silence fell over the room. Superman leaned forward, his eyes wide with disbelief. Tashinori. What is this? This is All Might, Batman said grimly. The symbol of peace. Or rather, what's left of him. 5 years ago, he fought a villain who gave him this wound. His stomach was destroyed, one of his lungs removed. He can only maintain his heroic form for approximately 3 hours a day. The rest of the time, he is this. A secret he has guarded with his life, because the Japanese Hero Society is a house of cards built on his image. If that image shatters, the entire structure collapses into chaos. He let the horrifying information sink in. Izuku Midoriya knows this. I don't know how, but I am certain of it. His first major intervention, the sludge villain, was the day he first made contact with All Might in the original timeline. His actions are intrinsically linked to him. The most dangerous secret in his head is not about a future war. It's about the present fragility of the world's greatest hero. He looked directly at Superman, his expression grim. This is the knowledge the boy holds. Knowledge that, if leaked, could plunge an entire nation into anarchy. Can you still argue that he is not a threat, Clark? Can any of you? The revelation shifted the entire dynamic of the room. This wasn't an abstract debate about temporal mechanics anymore. It was about a concrete, immediate, and catastrophic threat. The image of the broken, skeletal All Might was a far more potent argument than any of Batman's logic. This changes things, Hal Jordan admitted, leaning forward, his cavalier attitude gone. If the kid knows that, he's holding a nuke. So what do you propose, Bruce? Wonder Woman asked, her voice heavy. I don't need the full support for the Cassandra Protocol. Not yet, Batman said, pressing his advantage. But I need the authority to act. To draw him out. To secure him by any means necessary. I will create a scenario, a controlled trap. I will leak carefully fabricated intelligence about a direct threat to All Might, a threat only the boy, with his foreknowledge, could possibly debunk. His heroic nature will compel him to intervene. He will break cover, and he will lead me to Aizawa. Once he is clear of Yuei's protection, I will contain him. You want to use All Might as bait? Superman said, his voice a low rumble of disapproval. I want to neutralize a global threat before it detonates. Batman corrected him. It is the most efficient path. The risks are calculated and contained. Give me the latitude to handle this. Let me bring the boy in. Then, we can decide his fate together. He had them. He could see it in their eyes. He had framed the debate perfectly. It was no longer about imprisoning a child. It was about protecting a nation's stability and preventing a global security catastrophe. It was a bitter, ugly compromise, but in their world, sometimes those were the only choices available. Superman looked down at the table, his shoulders slumped. He hated it. Every fiber of his being screamed that it was wrong, but he couldn't refute the logic, not in the face of All Might's devastating secret and the Flash's terrifying warnings. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. It was enough. One by one, the others acquiesced. The Justice League had given its tacit approval. The hunt was back on. And this time, Batman had the silent backing of the most powerful beings on the planet.